I was shot 4 times in my back in Afghanistan. Once in my hip and once in my stomach and again in my ankle. I was stabbed 3 times in my lower back and 3 times in my chest.
Hey, welcome to the Atheist Vanguard. I'm Shane Isgrig.
My name is Patel. I'm a chemical engineer who grew up in a Hindu household but is now an atheist.
And I'm Katie Gaines. I'm the president of Freethinkers Association of Central Texas and San Antonio.
All right, let's go ahead and see the rest of that clip.
My name is Joshua Murphy.
Hey, Joshua Murphy. My name is Ben, and I'm from the Atheist Vanguard. And I'm just out here getting people's stories of faith. So, are you a person of faith?
Yes.
Which particular flavor? Which denomination?
Christian.
Christian?
Yes.
And how did you come to have the Christian faith?
I was raised on it. My daddy took me to church every Sunday. It's just something we always done.
How many generations do you say believed in Christ? How many going back through the family tree, do you think?
Well, my grandpa, he don't really believe, so.
So you got one non-believer in there.
Yeah.
But most everybody else is on board.
Yeah.
Okay, so is Grandpa still embraced? Is there still a lot of love for the family, for Grandpa?
Yeah.
They're not cutting him out just because he's not on board?
No.
That's awesome.
Not at all.
So what makes your faith so strong? Do you have any personal stories?
Well, I was shot 4 times in my back in Afghanistan. Once in my hip and once in my stomach and again in my ankle. I was stabbed 3 times in my lower back and 3 times in my chest.
Well, you're very fortunate to make it out.
I have shrapnel all down the left side of my body on top of that, so I'm blessed to be alive, and I believe that it was only a work of God.
So you believe that God was working and helping you to make it out of the war zone safely?
Yes.
I'm assuming a lot here. Let me not assume it was a war zone. Maybe it was your bunkmate.
No, it was a war zone.
It was a war zone. An enemy combatant.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, I mean, man, I'm blessed to be alive, so, I mean, there's only one thing that could have done that, I feel like.
So your training, your military training, the hardware that you have, you credit any of that to your success?
Yes, I do, actually. My vest was hit a total of 9 times, and only 4 of them connected in, so I'm blessed that instead of getting 9 bullet holes in my back, I only got 4.
Nice.
So, and they missed all major arteries, or major.
We're gonna call that a win.
So, yeah. 7.62 by 39 round ain't no.
It's no joke.
Ain't no joke. Yeah.
Right. Wow. So you have an amazing story of being attacked and you survived, and you credit God for that. Is there any other? I mean,
well, I've gone through a breakup with my last wife, and I feel like it's helped a lot, reading the Bible, and, you know.
So it's a comforting thing for you? Is there any specific passages you can recall, or?
One of my favorite books in the Bible is Proverbs chapter 12, verse 1. Anyone who loves knowledge wants to be told they are wrong. It is the fools that hate being corrected. That way, like, I feel like if you were to give somebody advice and they don't heed to your information and try and take it under how do I say, under advisement, I feel like they're not necessarily a lost cause, but you need to let them drift their own way for a little bit.
Well, how would you know the advice you're giving them is a good advice, or the best advice, or the most accurate advice?
Anybody just believing in the Bible, I believe that right there is one of the best verses you can just say to somebody. Again, it's Proverbs chapter 12, verse 1. Anyone who loves knowledge wants to be told they're wrong. It's the fools that hate being corrected. The book of Proverbs is just straight knowledge and wisdom passed down, you know, so I feel like it has a lot to offer.
There are other parts of the Bible. As an atheist, I haven't read all the Bible, but the Bible that I have read is pretty disturbing. I started at the top, Genesis.
Okay.
There's a lot of weird stuff going on.
Okay.
At the end, Revelations as well. That's some pretty shocking revelations, if you will.
Yeah.
So how much of it have you read? Have you read the entire book?
I mean, when I was younger, I read it front to back, back to front. So, I mean, I don't really read it that much anymore. I just mainly pray daily, and that's about it.
So with your knowledge of the Bible, did you think it was a moral thing for you to enlist in the service?
I believed it was the righteous thing to do, seeing it is that we're at war, and I've had a couple of my neighbors move out and go overseas as well, and I was like, you know what, fuck it.
So how did that commandment not to kill factor into your service?
Okay, so Joshua, he was a warrior for God, and he killed for the righteousness of God and to protect one's brothers, you know, and that's what I aim to do every single time I go out there on that field. Every single time we leave the FOB, I aim to protect my brothers, protect what's right, protect my God and country.
So there are people who you're fighting against who also have a God that they also believe is the one true God.
Yeah.
How would an outsider know which God is the right God? Which God is the true God? If they were looking at...
I really wouldn't even look at it like that. I didn't really go over there for religion-wise. I went over there to protect my brothers, you know, my sisters, and look out for them and make sure that we all made it home.
Awesome. Well, our military is there to protect us from all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yeah.
Would you take up arms against a tyrant?
Against who?
Against a tyrant, a domestic tyrant.
Yeah.
Let's say the president was on some crazy nonsense.
Yeah.
And you feel that's your duty to protect this country.
Okay, it's depending if it's more of like if it would be detrimental to the United States of America, yes, I would.
Okay, so...
But unless that comes across, which I don't think that they'd make anybody president, they'd make this country make it into a detrimental state. I don't believe that they would, so...
Okay. Would you be less likely or more likely to vote for a candidate that was an atheist, or if they claimed they didn't believe in a God?
I don't know. I never really thought about it like that. I listen to what they have to say and listen to what they have to offer, and I can kind of tell whether they're lying or not, so I choose through there.
Okay. The book of Revelations says that there's an end times, there's a prophecy. Are you at all worried that any of our political candidates, present or future, will try to somehow make that prophecy come true, to fulfill the prophecy of the end times? Or is that at all a concern? Because the atheists don't really believe...
I really don't believe that, but I do believe that sooner or later something will come to an end.
So do you believe in the book of Revelation?
Yes,
that it's going to happen exactly as it's detailed that way?
I don't feel like it's 100% detailed the way it's going to happen, but I do believe that it is going to happen.
Okay. So do you believe someone would be just and righteous in kind of triggering that? Because...
I feel like it could, yeah.
So there are political candidates in our structure today that are true believers, and they feel, as you do, the book of Revelations is a thing that, you know, it's going to happen. And maybe they're put into power. They're called by God to be at that place at that time with their finger on the button. How does that make you feel that it's a possibility that someone that has this end-time, world-ending belief might be in the position of power to make that happen? And might do it because they feel their faith dictates it or commands it, you know? It's kind of scary for me.
Me personally, I'm ready to die, so if I die, I really don't care.
So your afterlife, you think, is secure with Jesus and you're going to heaven?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're all going to die. There's no sense being afraid of it.
If I was going to die, I would have died overseas.
We could die today.
So I'm meant for a greater purpose. Yeah, I could die right now. And somebody can come up behind me and shoot me. So, with that being said, I mean, I'm just ready for it.
Well, today, I noticed there's a fiesta going on.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping you don't die today without getting your fair amount of fiesta in, okay?
I'll definitely go have some drinks.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you very much for talking to me today. I appreciate it.
Okay, that certainly leaves us with a lot to unpack. I'd like to begin by saying that I do appreciate him for his service. I do respect him for it, and I'm happy that he made it out okay, not only for his own sake, but also for the sake of this great interview. There was a lot to say. What do you think? What would you want to start with?
My first notes, basically that he went straight into that it was a work of God that he was alive.
Right.
And the biggest problem that I have with that is, as someone who has had multiple surgeries, I certainly don't give the credit of my still being here to God. I give that credit to the people that my surgeons, my medical caregivers, my doctors, and my follow-ups. And I think that it really kind of takes that what's the word I'm looking for?
Credit.
That credit that those people have worked so hard. That is their jobs. That's what they do. They are there to save people, and not just so far as his recovery, but just touching. I'm not familiar with protective equipment or guns or anything like that with the military. So basically, but I also know that there's protective equipment that they wear. And again, there's, I'm just stuttering here.
Yeah,
Take over, please.
Okay, so I think that when he's talking about how this is, he survived this, all these attacks, all these shootings, all of these things, he doesn't understand how that could be the case, and therefore God exists. We're not unfamiliar with this particular argument. But one of the many things that comes to my mind on this guy's particular interview is that he did in fact have the protective gear on. So I'm not saying that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that he doesn't have faith in God. But kind of like with surgery, a lot of people will credit God for it, but it doesn't always mean that they don't credit the people too. But the people were working through God, right? So God was working through that protective gear to protect him the rest of the way from the wounds. But it also kind of goes into this guy saying that, yeah, I got shot a good number of times, and it is just a miracle that I wasn't shot more.
Right. Yeah, Shane, going on about that, I think it's the double standard that most religious people have when it comes to medical treatment.
Yes.
So, for example, let's say a patient is in critical conditions and they're sent to the hospital. Let's say the doctors operate on them, and our first scenario is they come back alive. They praise God for that. And the second scenario is that person dies. And guess what happens? They blame the surgeons. There's a double standard right there.
Right, and you also have this ever-moving goalpost that goes in multiple directions, because if that person dies, that's part of God's plan. You know what I mean? In the prayer, it just wasn't meant to be. But if that person makes it, then that was the work of God. So there's no scenario they can come up with in which they wouldn't give credit to God or God wasn't doing the right thing. And we see that here with, yeah, God saved me. He, didn't save me from getting shot those other times, but he didn't let me get shot enough times for it to be fatal.
Right. Or here's something I've always wondered. People always say God's looking after me. But what about all the 7 billion plus people on this planet? Is God looking after them? Like, for example, in this case, this guy, he went out and fought and he got shot, right? But he survived. What about those soldiers who got shot and didn't survive? Why wasn't God looking out for them?
Correct.
What makes him so special compared to all the other people?
Yeah, it also brings up that,
nonsense.
You would have to take the stance that the people that didn't make it deserved to die, because God saved you. You're saying that he could have saved anybody, but he chose you. So you are, in a way, favoring yourself over anyone else who's died. And it's the same for people who have had cancer and have recovered and credit God for it. There are a lot of people who die of it every day. And
children, too.
Yeah, and it's hard to talk about it without getting into that. And if you're going to take the stance that God healed you of your cancer, you're telling me that God chose you over all of those children that he did not save.
Right, and then... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly with my family, too. Like, when something good happens to them or they survive something, they say, God saved me. And I tell them, well, what about all the other people? What makes you so special compared to all the other people who go through the exact same thing, but they end up dying or even worse?
One of the counter arguments that you hear for that a lot, and we've spoken, about this millions of times, but, there's those that also believe that a certain amount of suffering must come from your belief and to really be righteous, right?
Yeah. This has kind of been covered on the show before. It's like when people say that, everything can't just be happiness all the time. Well, you'd be bored, right? And then Josh brought up that being bored, that's another form of being unhappy. And you're telling me that you believe in a creator who can do anything, then you're saying that he could have made a world in which no one had to be unhappy. So that comes up as well.
Right.
Hard not to go back over that. Then I will also, one thing that I've heard that was new to me, which I love when we get something new because a lot of the time we get the same stuff worded differently. But when this guy said that he didn't think that America would put someone in office that would turn America into a detrimental state, that is a level of faith in the political system that I have never seen before, because even people that I know who are moderate, who don't know if they'd say they're left-wing or right-wing, usually would tell you in any instance who they would or wouldn't vote for. I've never heard somebody take the stance of, no matter who gets elected, everything's going to be fine.
Right, and they're just, you know, the election is, just for example, the election process isn't perfect, especially here, and we're seeing it in other countries that are running elections for the first time. And so I agree that's not something that I've heard before, but that is putting a lot of faith in God to make sure that somebody who is righteous enough to be a leader will become a leader, and not somebody who is just greedy for power. Right. And we know that this is not the case.
But then he did continue to say, you'll notice when he was asked if he would ever vote for an atheist, he didn't say, no, I wouldn't vote for an atheist. He actually said that I would listen to what the person had to say and I would look at whether I think they were being honest or not. So he's not somebody who wouldn't vote for an atheist, which we have definitely a lot of in this country, right?
Right, exactly.
But if he thinks that, you know, it's kind of in the hands of God, but an atheist can be the president, not only does it bring up free will questions of how we're working through God's plan if we don't even believe in God, but it really comes down to I'm unable to put any good, effective line of reasoning to this and really figure it out. You know, it seems like he was kind of all over the place in his beliefs.
Well, I appreciate the fact they didn't automatically rule out somebody for being a president because they're rule out somebody for being a president because they're an atheist. He actually took the time to look at. He actually took the time to look at what specifically is this person going to say and do, and does that actually qualify for what I believe would benefit America in the long run.
But why would you even listen to what different candidates were going to do if you had that level of confidence that no matter what happens, we're never going to have a president who would put us in a detrimental
Why would we even
state.
need voting?
Why would we? Yeah, why would you as an individual take the time to even listen? Like, you wouldn't even care about making judgments. You would just, like he said earlier, yeah, it's fine. I don't need to think about it anymore. So
it goes back to that point I made about how people who say everything is in God's hands, like they themselves don't actually believe in that stuff because there's evidence to support that clearly, that they don't believe in that statement.
Well, and I made a note here specifically, belief as a comfort. You know, one of the things that he mentioned was that he had recently or was going through a divorce, and one of the things that he uses his belief for is as a comfort. And that goes, what you said goes right into that. You know, again, this is something that we hear all the time. It is that it's used for comfort. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of that has to do with so many fundamentalists out there just preaching that fire and brimstone for all eternity.
Right. Well, imagine if you were convinced that the only reason you were, and what was the word we were just throwing out was, it wasn't peace. I'm sorry.
Just comfort. Just belief as a comfort.
Belief in the comfort.
For any
right.
reason.
So, if you had this belief that if you lost your belief, you would also lose your comfort, there is a high probability for some cognitive dissonance there. You're probably not going to accept any evidence that proves you wrong because, as far as you're concerned, this is your source of comfort.
Or it's going to have to take something really big to knock that wall down.
Yeah, if somebody
even make a dent.
Right, and maybe if somebody meets a few atheists and realizes that they have alternative sources of comfort, then maybe that's something that could help them in their process. But if somebody's convinced that a belief in a God or even a particular religion is the only source for a comfort, I don't know how much there really is to say to that person after that.
that's really one of the big reasons why I loved that you guys decided to start coming down to San Antonio, and that we are actually getting to, kind of work together and talk about that, because, that's something we've been talking about in San Antonio for quite a while, is getting out there and letting people know that you can find comfort elsewhere, and there are morals without all of this other 1,000-year-old ideas.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, we've had people that were surprised we were atheists, and then we've had people that were surprised that we were kind, because they didn't really consider that was a thing.
Right, like, oh, you're so kind, you're an atheist?
It's like, yeah, we feed homeless people and all that stuff that a lot of your churches do.
Yeah, same thing with me. Like, I didn't know if you guys know this, but India has a population of over 1 billion people, and roughly 99% of them are actually religious. So that's like 1% or less than 1% is non-religious. And so when they see me, they automatically assume that I'm some sort of religious, spiritual guru. And I'm like, no, I'm an atheist. I don't believe.
It's predominantly Hindu as to this day in India, correct?
Yeah, it's still Hindu. It's still Hindu.
So people do still assume that you're a Hindu?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Especially by my last name, too. Like Patel, it's a very common Hindu last name.
Right.
But I tell them that I'm an atheist. I don't have any belief in supernatural things, let alone a deity for that matter.
Yeah, and then you kind of get that gasp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or sometimes people saying they don't actually believe you're an atheist. I one time had a guy tell me that he doesn't believe I'm an atheist because atheists have a cold, dead look in their eyes, and I don't. And I've asked him if he'd like to come down here to the Atheist Community of Austin. He hasn't taken me up on that, so maybe that'll happen. But yeah.
And also, when I was a kid, I grew up with different people, and there was these two Indian people. I thought they were Hindu or Islamic, but it turns out they were actually Christian. I was like, wait, Christians? There are Indian people that are followers of Christianity?
Right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, it shocks
when
you.
I grew up, and as a kid, I grew up mostly in a Hindu household. I didn't know that there were other religions in India, aside from Hinduism and Islam. And then when I found out about Christianity, I was like, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And now I'm an atheist, so that's another shocker for most people.
Yeah, no, it really can be. I've been told that I'm one of the most spiritual people somebody knows. I'm like, oh, I don't believe in spirits, so. All right, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just had a couple of other points.
Yeah, go for it.
Kind of going back to when they were talking about why he went to war, and he started out by saying that he went to war, he signed up in the military and went to war because it was the righteous thing to do. But then he kind of contradicted himself and said, I didn't go for religious reasons. I went to protect my brothers and sisters that were already there, that were already being killed. I went to protect them.
Well, to him, that was righteous. So
right,
we make
and
that
so
as the
that's
follow-up.
that's where you get that, well, God's acting through me to go.
Correct.
And that's where the righteousness comes from. But then, Ben asks him, or, we get into the discussion, well, is this God's war? Are you fighting for God, or are you fighting for a government? And what exactly are we fighting for?
Yeah, is he just playing like Clash of Clans on his phone and like you're his team? Like that's...
Right, and which God is the right God to fight for?
Yeah, because, Ben brought this up in the interview as well, those people on the other team, they also worship a God, and they are also...
fighting for that God.
Yeah, they're fully convinced that they're working through God. They're doing God's work. I don't understand why God would put people to war with each other, or why, either side thinks that the other side isn't God's people, right? So
there's something I've always wondered, Shane. I've always wondered, why is it that God seems to always talk to only those who are extremists in their views? He doesn't talk to the moderates. Why is he only talking to those who are extremists in their respective religion?
And when no one else is around.
And when no one else is around. When no one else is around,
right.
Right.
And also, why is it that God wants the exact same things that the person who's making that claim wants? It's like the splitting image of that same person.
And why is it that when you make the same claims, they are not believed? Like, I legitimately had a dream that a God revealed himself to me and said that he didn't like the way religious people were depicting him, and he thought that atheists were doing his work by making him appear better. And anytime I tell a Christian, or honestly not just a Christian, any theist, because I have friends of different religions, when I tell them I had a dream and I talked to God, before I continue, they interrupt me and go, that was God.
That's
you were talking to God. And then they hear the rest of the story, and it isn't anything similar to what they wanted to hear. And they either think I'm bullshitting them, which I'm not. I did have that dream. Or they're able to go, well, that's just a dream, which raises the question, what's the criteria that we're using to determine whether or not your dream is, in fact, a sign from God. And it's just like, how does a neutral observer figure out, okay, let's say I believe in a God and I believe one of these teams going to war is his people. How does a neutral observer figure out which one of these is more likely to be God's chosen people?
Yeah, it's like another point I saw on Atheist Bread one time. Someone said that, isn't it funny how Indian people, when they have near-death experiences, they see Hindu gods, they don't see Jesus. Isn't that a mighty odd coincidence?
Well, which Jesus are you seeing? Like, if you're white, do you see white Jesus? If you're black, do you see black Jesus?
That's the thing. Do I get to meet the flying spaghetti monster when I go, right?
I want to meet Thor, man.
Or do I? Yeah. Well, he's over there. So,
did you guys have any other notes? I had one more final
yeah, go
note.
on your one last note.
What really struck me, and this, obviously we hear this a lot, but it's still, especially coming from somebody who's been through all of that and survived it, he straight up says he doesn't care if he dies. He's ready. And
well, why would you be afraid to die if you thought it's just going to get better?
But not only that, but I mean, if it was God's will that he lived and a freaking meteor hit us tomorrow, I mean, would those not negate each other out? Or would it just be simply, would it just simply be, well, the end was coming anyways? Like, how could you not expect it?
Right. No, exactly. Like I said, it's, if God doesn't do what they're expecting him to do, then it's because he works in mysterious ways, and there isn't much of a way of getting around that.
And I don't understand that mentality, because even as a believer, I was very much a Christian. There was a deconversion process, but not, and I had a near-death experience when I was 15 years old. I almost drowned. And not one time did I think, even as a believer, that I was ready to die. Even when I believed that there was this afterlife, my thought was, oh, fuck, this is how I'm gonna die. This is it? At 15, 16 years old, this is how I'm going out? And not at one point was I okay with being done with this life. And now as a non-believer, I feel like when I hear people say, I don't care, I'm ready to die, it just, as somebody who thinks that no matter what you believe, the bodies that we're in right now, the beings that we are sitting here today, this is the only opportunity that we get to be these beings that we're sitting here today, no matter what you believe in.
Right. I mean, if time is something we can measure in numbers and so is money, I think it's okay for me to make this analogy. Oh. If I had, let's say, $10 million cash, but I was convinced that I had $10 billion in my bank, I would actually be pretty devastated to find out that I only have $10 million. And instead of being grateful for this $10 million, it's so much to be grateful for. If you thought you had $10 billion, oh man, that $10 million isn't shit. And now you just found out you have a fraction of what you thought. And it really shows how much a belief in an afterlife really cheapens the one that you at least know for certain that you do have.
Right, right. And that's kind of what I was getting at, is that it kind of cheapens it, because...
Yes.
Yeah, there's actually a good quote by Ricky Gervais again. He said something about like how it's a common myth that atheists have nothing to live for, which is the exact opposite. Atheists have nothing to die for, but we have everything to live for.
Everything to live for.
And to me, that's a lot better of a moral to keep living versus a religious argument saying, don't worry, once you die, you'll be in a better place.
Right, right.
Yeah, that is correct. Okay, well, I think we got out everything we needed to. Do you guys have anything else to add to that?
Something I've always wondered, when you die and go to heaven, what version of you shows up? Does your 8-year-old version show up? Does your 20-year-old version show up? Or just before you die?
I don't think it matters.
I've always wondered that personally.
It's all bliss all the time, so what does it even matter?
Well, you're going to get very different answers depending on the person. I mean, I've never really heard two people describe heaven as being the same thing. But I think the most common answer you're going to get is that you're in some kind of ageless body.
Because I remember some people saying, like, young children die because God needs a young angel. Or
yeah,
I know. I know,
sucks, dude.
That's what I've heard.
I would hate to die as an old man, and then you're just stuck being an old person for eternity.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, with all these little baby kid angels.
Yeah, you're like, no, man, I should have fucking died earlier.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like, do you show up in your prime, or do you show up right when you're on your deathbed? Like, that just seems so strange to me.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for watching the Atheist Vanguard. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Adios.